Good evening. Tonight we continue the reading of Chasing the Sun, written by Ryan Boog, narrated by James A Greig. It is March 25th, 2026. Thank you, RJ Boog in the chat, sending out the gifteds already. Much appreciated, guys. We begin with interlude. Grants Pass, Oregon, 1925. William stops talking. The mountains are still green. The light on the desk has not moved much. They have not been here long. Hollis watches him. Over a page of notes, they have been taken. Over a page of notes have been taken. Sorry guys, mind you, this is live, so I might make mistakes from time to time. Also, I got twin boys running around upstairs, so bear with us. We can start from the top. Maybe we'll edit this out in post, we'll see. William stops talking. The mountains are still green. The light on the desk has not moved much. They have not been here long. Hollis watches him. Over a page of notes have been taken. His pen is still. He does not ask a question. He has been an attorney long enough to know when a man is not finished, only gathering what comes next. A cart passes on G Street below. The wheels grind against packed dirt and the sound rises through the floorboards and fades. Do I dare ask how many places you've moved in Dublin? William rolls his shoulders once, settles. I'll get to that. After that, things moved quickly. Chapter 7. The Corner with All the Money. Number 13, Aston's Quay. The Corner Unit, 1870. William was right. He was almost always right about commerce, which was one of the more infuriating things about being married to him. The shop commanded the foot of the O'Connell Bridge, and its display window wrapped around the corner, visible from two directions. The quay and the bridge approach. Every person who crossed from the north side of the Liffey to the south walked past William Boog's boots. Every carriage, every cart, horse-powered tram, every gentleman on his way to business, and every lady on her way to the department stores passed within arm's reach of his signage. The rooms above were noticeably larger. Mary could breathe. William hung his sign with care of a man who believed that was the last time he would hang it. The letters were the same. W. Boog. Bootmaker. But they were larger now. The board was wider, the paint fresh. The sign hung above a corner door that faced two streets at once. Mary stood in the doorway, holding Letitia on her hip. Austin and Mary Margaret chased each other around the empty shop floor, their footsteps echoing off the bare walls. Mary looked up at the sign, then back down the quay toward number 6. And further still towards number 7. 3 shops, 3 homes, all on the same stretch of Dublin waterfront. Your pa has dragged us up and down this quay like a man looking for his hat, she said to Letitia, bouncing her. And do you know what? I think he's finally found it. Letitia grabbed Mary's nose. Mary laughed, a real laugh, full and warm. Customers streamed in off the bridge. William was busier than he'd ever been, 2-3 customers waiting at a time. He worked with a new urgency and confidence, the confidence of a man who had bet correctly and knew it. The display window showcased his finest work, and people stopped to admire the boots before they even intended to buy. He hired a young lad to sweep and carry, a thin boy with quick eyes and quiet hands, who took the broom without being told twice. Teresa arrived in 1870. Mary held a new baby while the other 3 children peered at their sister with varying degrees of interest. Austin poked Teresa's foot. She kicked. He jumped back, delighted. "She kicked me!" William stood in the doorway beaming. "That's a Boog for you. Comes out fighting." "She gets that from me, not you," Mary said from the bed, exhausted but smiling. He unfolded the paper, wrote Teresa beneath Letitia. 5 names under Mary's now, 1 with an X, 4 without. At the counter with the piece of paper, writing with concentration of a man defusing a bomb, Mary came down from upstairs, Teresa on her hip, and found him hunched over the page. "What are you writing? A letter?" "An advertisement. For the paper." She set Teresa down in a small pen William built from scrap wood, 4 boards nailed into a square with a blanket on the bottom, and came to look over his shoulder. "An advertisement in the actual newspaper?" "The Irish Times. Every man in Dublin reads it. Every man in Dublin needs boots." "And how much does an advertisement in the Irish Times cost?" The slightest pause. "It's an investment." "That's not a number, William." He read what he had written, his voice taking on the cadence of a man who had rehearsed this in his head a dozen times. 13 Aston's Quay. Extraordinary reduction in the prices of ladies' and gentlemen's dress and walking boots. Ladies' boots from 6 shillings 6 pence to 11 shillings 6 pence. Gents' dress and walking from 10 shillings 6 pence to 12 shillings 6 pence. Our best dress boots, walking boots, and watertight from 13 shillings 6 pence to 16 shillings. Oh no. He looked up at her, proud. She was listening. He saved the best for last. "We keep nothing but our own manufacture, as we don't encourage Northampton trash." He grinned. Mary stared at him. "Northampton trash?" "Northampton trash. That's what it is, and that's what I'll call it. English factory boots falling apart after a fortnight. I won't have it in my shop, and I won't have it on this quay." "You're putting that in the paper? Northampton trash?" "In bold, if they'll let me. William Boog, 13 Aston's Quay, near O'Connell Bridge." "You're going to start a war with every English bootmaker in Dublin." "Good. Let them come. I'll make them a proper pair of boots and they'll never go back." She kissed the top of his head. "You're mad. Put it in the paper." He folded the advertisement carefully and tucked it in his jacket. Excerpt from the Irish Times, April 7th, 1870. William Jr. arrived in 1871. Mary held him up and gave William a look, finally a living second-born, male, one who can carry on the first name. William took his namesake and held him tight to his chest. He opened his mouth to speak and nothing came. For once in his life, William Boog was out of words. The terror, the pride, the weight of giving, a child his own name, the knowledge of what that name has meant and what it might yet mean. "You're out of words, and I'm out of energy," Mary said from the bed. "Dead tired. My body needs to rest. I need to rest." She raised her voice to the room. "Boog family, you'll have to put up with foul-smelling garments for a while." William laughed, a real full laugh. Uh-oh. I just got alerted there's ads. Let's see, turn it off. My apologies, guys. I forgot to turn that off. Let's go. There we go. Okay. I don't actually see it up there. Okay. The joys of running a live show, you guys. Okay. Okay. Well, we'll have to keep an eye on that. If you guys want to help keep this show running ad-free, be greatly appreciated. Use your Twitch Prime. And then I'm going to work with Ryan Boog to get us, I think we can probably get a website going where you guys can ensure that 100% of your donation lands towards us instead of going to pay other companies like Twitch or YouTube or anything. So we appreciate the support. And I will jump back on this now. I was unfortunate about the ads thing there. Let me see, just to double check. There we go. All right. Should be good to go. We will continue. William laughed a real full laugh, the laugh that filled the room and startled Austin, who toddled over to inspect his new brother with the curiosity of a cat. That night, William sat at the table and added William to the paper beneath Teresa. 6 names now under Mary's, 1 with an X, 5 without. He folded the paper along its slightly worn crease and put it away. William Jr. grew through the winter and spring. He was stronger and thicker than George, and Austin was, which was a relief for William and Mary this time. By summer, he was sitting up. By August, he was pulling himself along the floor on his belly. He pulled himself near to anything bright or forbidden, especially the lamps. His grip was slightly stronger than George's. Maybe that was the evidence of the Boog family being more nourished and better off at this time. William noticed this, but never said anything about it. In the evenings, William held his namesake in a chair and rocked him, just as he'd done with his previous 2 boys. The motions were the same. The only thing different were the boys. William studied his boy, envisioning what his life would be like without struggle when he gets older. The creaking sound on the floor was haunting. It was a part of life. It was a sign of life. Even though William now had 4, 3, 2, and 1-year-old, he finally had his namesake. Austin would put funny things on William Jr.'s head and giggle. Mary Margaret tagged along in the fun. Letitia would get jealous at the attention, and in turn put her attention towards Teresa, who herself was so young she had no idea what was going on. By October, the Boog house had a hum to it, a lot of noise, a schedule, a routine, sometimes meals, sometimes no meals, church, a community, health and sickness. Teresa had caught a stomach bug which was likely caused by her putting anything she could find in her mouth. Within a week, she fought it off and recovered. Shortly after, William Jr. was trying to eat food, and early in the day, noisy, alert, healthy, he sat on Mary's lap and flung porridge. A normal day in the Boog house. He got sick shortly after as well. By midday, his skin was hot, not just hot. This was a fever the Boogs had never felt before. It was almost as if William Jr. had hot coals under his skin. The smell came next. William Jr.'s body emptied itself in waves. Mary kept changing the diaper clothes, and they would soak through. She was running low on cloths, the room above the shop filled with the smell that was sweet and foul all at once. William came up from the shop. He stood in the doorway. The smell hit him, and while normally he would make a joke about it, something inside of him stopped himself. How long has he been like this? Since late morning. He won't take water. I've tried. William knelt beside them. The boy's face had changed. The normal strength he'd expect to see was gone. Junior's skin was pale, lips were cracked, and his hot skin tried to cool itself in tiny beads of sweat that were of no use. William immediately sent his other children to be with their neighbor. He couldn't risk more than that was already happening. They sent for the dispensary doctor. He couldn't make it until morning. The 3 of them slept through the night, hanging on to any sliver of hope they had. The candle had an audible flicker and danced shadows on the wall. The rest of the room was still. Junior's eyes were staring into nothing. His eyes slowly closed as he fell into a sleep. They all needed sleep at this point, and within 10 minutes, all 3 of them were in their dreams. They awoke with a knock on the door. It was the dispensary doctor. William looked at Mary and Junior still sleeping and went to the door. He told the doctor the symptoms and hurried him up the stairs. When they got to the room, Mary was awake. She was not saying anything. "Mary, the doctor is here." She didn't look up from William Jr. A tear ran over the curve of her cheekbone, dripped off her chin and onto William Jr.'s lifeless body. "Mr. Boog, I'm sorry for this. Diphtheria is ruthless. I have to see it far too often. It's very common, unfortunately." The doctor proceeded to analyze William Jr. Without emotion, his conclusion stood. He had many more appointments to get to. William went to the lifeless boy and laid a hand on him. He felt guilt and embarrassment. Austin would now be his focal point, his son who could pass on the Boog name. For now, William had arrangements to make. William knew the road this time. He knew the carriage would be waiting. He knew how the pine box felt under his hand. The rough grain, the nails not fully countersunk. He sat next to it again, his hand pressed flat against the lid, and the carriage pulled north over the bridge, past the Liffey, through streets he had traveled 5 years ago carrying a box the same size. The same bumps in the road, the same silence from the driver, the same indifference from the city. The carts and pedestrians and dogs that did not look up when a small coffin passed. The only difference was a burnt orange sunrise that fought through the morning fog. The high walls of Glasnevin appeared. The gate stood open under the gray sky. William tightened his grip on the box as the carriage slowed. The gravediggers were waiting. He handed his son to them. They buried William Jr. in the same section as George. No stone. The ground was soft. Same as before. A priest said words. William did not try to remember them. He had already forgotten the priest's words once, and the effort of forgetting a second time did not require effort at all. He wanted this over with. He wanted to go back and protect Austin. He walked back alone, 45 minutes on foot. He did not hire a carriage for the return. He walked south through streets that looked the same as they had looked when George died. The Liffey was the same, the shop was the same, and the sign above the door still read, W. Boog, bootmaker. None of it had changed, yet 2 of his sons were in the ground behind him. That evening, Mary grieving on her own and managing the kids, William sat at the table. He took the paper from his breast pocket, unfolded it. The paper, still fresh, was getting more use than William wanted it to. He found his namesake, William. He picked up the pen. He prepared himself for another surrender. 2 sons, 11 months each. He drew the X. Mary, George, X. Austin, Mary, Letitia, Teresa, William, X. He folded the paper, put it back. He did not press his hand against it this time. He sat at the table and stared into nothing until the candle burned itself out. A different flow to life happened at number 13. William worked before dawn, and after dark his bench lit by candle. He was not just surviving anymore. He was trying to build something that outlasted him. While running from the death that was haunting him, the newspaper advertisement brought new customers. A man walked in one morning holding a clipping from the Irish Times, the advertisement circled in pencil, and asked for a pair of water tights. William caught Mary's eye across the shop. She gave him the smallest nod, a concession so restrained it barely qualifies as acknowledgement. He would be insufferable about this for weeks. Once in a while, in the lull between customers, William stood at the shop window and watched the boats on the River Liffey. These boats were small since the bridges were so close to the water. His eyes followed them until they rounded the bend and were gone. A low-ceiling pub off Aston's Quay. The year was 1872. The air was thick and pipe smoke and the sour sweetness of spilled stout. William sat at the table with 2 Irish laborers he had befriended through boot repairs, a dock worker with hands like shovels, and a second man, wiry and skeptical, who questioned everything, including the quality of his own pint. William sipped his Guinness. Once it hit his tongue, a dark, rich flavor that was sweet accompanied the very slight carbonation. After a hearty day's work, it went down a little too smoothly. "You heard about O'Malley, right?" the dock worker said. "Which one? There's tons of them." "Patrick. You know, walks with a gimp, patchy beard, Sean's brother." "What about him?" "That he was caught stealing?" "Aye, there's more to it than that. We knew he stole a snuff box, wanting to enjoy a pipe like the rich folk. Apparently, Mayor Bulfin sat down in his snuff box in Stephen's Green and stepped away shortly. O'Malley stole that." "He's a dead man," William said. "And he'll never find work again. Poor bastard." Ha! It felt good to joke around with friends to William. His life had pulled him down to places he didn't want to go. "No difference here. Work around here is drying up anyways." The dock worker leaned in. "My cousins wrote from New York, says there's work for any man with hands and a backbone." "Aye, and half the ones who go up end up in the same slums over there, just with an American accent." But it's different, isn't it? Over there, they don't care where you're from. You work, you eat. You don't work, you starve. Same as here, except there's more to eat. No famines, like we got here." William listened. He was quiet, unusually so. He turned his glass slowly on the table, the spout leaving a dark ring on the wood. He looked left, then right, down at the ring, then back to his friends. "No famines? How much for passage?" Both men looked at him. "Mr. Fancy Boots here wants to go to the United States." They laughed loud, loose, deep in their cups. William smiled, but the smile did not reach the part of his brain that was already doing arithmetic. "Nah, I have 4 kids." He stood motionless. "That are alive, anyways. Besides, I'm plenty busy at work, but it would cost a fortune." "Fancy Boots, City of Paris. Remember the name. There's a ship, City of Paris. I've seen it. But you'd have to travel down to the Cork to catch it. That ship, it's slow. But if you save enough, it's affordable. For you, Fancy Boots, I've heard the first-class tickets can be as low as 15 to 20 pounds. They laughed again. William laughed along. "We wouldn't consider first class. Don't they just pile you up underneath? People are leaving here in droves. It can't be that expensive." The dock worker's face changed. He looked at William carefully. This man realized the joke was no longer a joke. "William, well, let's just say, you better start saving. You've got plenty of kids and a wife. I think the last I heard was to 6 to 7 pounds per person." William took a slow drink, set the glass down. "You're considering this, aren't you?" "Aye. Do the Irish earn more money there?" "At least 3 times as much. At least. My cousin says he once made 80 United States dollars in a month." "It's no paradise, be warned. People still get sick and die. They are still slums, and you have to deal with a different culture. A lot of folks aren't too fond of the Irish. You'd really have to charm your way around if you want to survive. It might be rough here, but we've got family. That's a big gamble to go to a place that doesn't welcome you to open arms." William sat with that. The numbers are what stood out to him the most. $8 in a month? $80 in a month? Then I'd be better start saving tonight. Looks like you'll be buying the next round. The pub swallowed their laughter. 3 men at a table, pints between them, voices lost in the noise. But one of the 3 was not laughing the same way anymore. One of the 3 was counting. Cheers. Late night, number 13, upstairs, the children were asleep. 4 of them arranged across the room. Austin lay sideways. Mary Margaret had thrown her blanket off. Teresa and Letitia were tangled together. Mary sat on the bed, mending a shirt by candlelight. William sat across from her on a stool. The candle threw long shadows. He was gathering himself. Mary sensed it. She had been married to this man long enough to read the silence that preceded his biggest ideas, the stillness before the plunge. Say it then. America. Mary's hand stopped moving. She did not look up. The needle held still, mid-stitch, and the silence that followed pressed against the walls and changed the air in the room. When? When I can pay for all of us. A year, maybe 2. And go where? New York first, then wherever there's work. I've heard Boston has Irish by the thousands. I could keep my craft. If not, I know there are farmhands, painters, laborers. I could learn a new trade. Start fresh. Mary finally looked up. Her face held everything at once. Fear, exhaustion, anger. 6 of us on a ship. 6 of us in America. How are you so certain that you can pull this off? A man can do whatever he sets his mind upon. Mary looked toward the corner where the children slept. George is buried here. William Jr. is buried here. It landed. William absorbed it in brief silence. A crease deepened between his eyes. He looked at his hands. I know. I cannot bury a third. I will carry them with us, every mile. Mary set the mending down in her lap. She did not go back to it. She looked at him with the steadiness she had carried since Stephen Street. Not anger, not surrender. A woman drawing a line. No. William opened his mouth. She stopped him. I have followed you from Michael's Lane to Stephen Street, to the quay, and to the quay, and to the next one. I've scrubbed floors, pregnant, and wrung sheets until my hands bled, and buried 2 children, and bore 5 more. And I have said yes every time, William. Every time you stood in a doorway with that look on your face, I have said yes. Her voice was steady. Her hands were still. I can't live with change like this. We have a community. I have a family. You keep asking me to change. It scares me, William. You are impossible. I'm sorry, but the answer is no. We have 4 children asleep on the floor, and I will not put them in a ship because you saw the ships on the river and started counting. William held her gaze. He had no answer for this. Everything she had said was true. Then we stay, he says. We stay in Ireland. Mary picked up the mending. She made 3 stitches. Neither of them spoke. The candle guttered and steadied. William pulled off his boots and lay down on his side of the bed with his back to the room. Mary sewed until the shirt was done, folded it, set it on the chair. She blew out the candle and lay in the dark, listening to the 4 small bodies breathing on the floor. She did not sleep. Three days passed. William did not mention America. He worked in the shop. He hung a new display on the window. He repaired a pair of boots for a solicitor on Parliament Street and charged him 2 shillings over the usual rate because the man had been rude to Mary the last time he came in. He did not watch the ships. Mary watched him not watching them. She saw the effort it cost him. The way he kept his eyes on the bench when a vessel passed the window. The way he swept the floor a second time rather than stand at the glass. On the 3rd morning, Mary left the children with Austin in charge and walked out of number 13 alone. She did not tell William where she was going. He was at his bench. He heard the door close and looked up, but she was gone already. She walked west along the quay, past the shop fronts and the carts, past the coal barges tied at the wall, to where the river widens and the last of the bridges gives way to open water. The wind off the levee was cold and smelled of salt and tar and the wet stone of the quay walls. She stood at the railing and watched a ship move slowly toward the harbor mouth, its hull low in the water, its wake spreading in a dull V behind it. Gulls followed the ship and then gave up, one by one, peeling off and circling back to the quay. She had never stood here like this. She had walked past this spot 1,000 times carrying water, carrying laundry, carrying children. She had never stopped. She had never watched where the ships go. The river bent south toward the bay. Beyond the bay was the Irish Sea. Beyond the sea is the Atlantic. She could not see any of this. She could not only see the gray water and the gray sky and the gulls circling back to the same stretch of the quay, the way they always circle back to. She stood there for a long time. A dock worker passed behind her and glanced at her once and kept walking. A woman with a basket of fish on her arm nodded. Mary nodded back, but did not move. She was not thinking about William. She was thinking about the quay wall under her hands and the fact that she had touched the same stone for 15 years and never once looked over the edge to see what was past it. She was thinking about the wash house on Stephen Street, the tenement on Michael's Lane, the 3 shops in this same stretch of waterfront. She had moved from door to door to door, always within sight of the same river, and every door had been William's door. The wind changed. She pulled her shawl tighter. She watched one more ship round the bend and disappear. She walked home. She came in through the shop door. William was at his bench, cutting leather. He looked up. She stood in the doorway with one cold still on her face. "I walked to the end of the quay," she said. He waited. "I've been looking at that river for 15 years, and I never once watched where it goes." She pauses. Her hands gripped the shawl at her chest. "I'll go, William. I'll take the children, and I'll get on whatever ship you find, and I'll go." William set down the knife. His face opened. "But I'm not going because you're chasing the sun. I'm going because I've been standing on this quay long enough. The ghosts of the boys have found me too." She held his gaze. He did not speak. There was nothing in that moment that required him to speak. "Fix the trunk," she said. "The latch is broken." William exhaled. He nodded once, got up, and went to the trunk in the corner. The latch was broken, as she'd said. He turned it over in his hands, examining the hinge. Chapter 8, Westward. The mathematics of the escape were brutal. It was counted in coins on a workbench by candlelight, in boots finished before dawn and repaired after dark, and every job that comes through the door of number 13 accepted without hesitation. William worked with the focused intensity of a man building an ark in dry weather. The rain was coming and the boat had to be ready. Mary took in washing, her hands already cracked from the years at the wash house on Stephen Street, split and bleed and heal and split again. She wrung sheets with the same fierce strength that first caught William's eye through the steam a decade ago. But now the strength was aimed at something. Each sheet wrung was a fraction of a pound. Each bundle carried was a step closer to a dock in Cork. Even the children helped. Austin, 6 years old and as serious as a magistrate, carried bundles of mended clothes through the streets with that grim determination of a boy who is absorbed, through some osmosis of the blood, his father's refusal to be still. William sold a pair of boots to a wealthy customer and got a better price than expected. He allowed himself a moment, a pause, standing at the counter, the coins warm in his palm. Then the moment passed and an arithmetic resumed. Behind a loose brick in the wall of the shop, a small tin, William added coins, counted, not enough. He added more, counted again. The seasons changed outside the window. Rain, gray skies, and a rare burst of sun that turns the Liffey gold for an hour before the clouds return. The tin filled. He counted the coins one final time. His face changed. He looked at Mary across the room. She was watching him. She knew. April 1873. The room above number 13 was nearly empty. Their belongings were packed into a battered trunk in several bundles. The children slept in a pile on the bare floor, tangled together for warmth. Their breathing, the only sound in the room, stripped of everything that made it theirs. William sat by the window. Mary came and sat beside him. The city hummed outside, Dublin doing what Dublin did, indifferent to who stayed and who left. He sat in the quiet. 4 of them were breathing in a pile on the floor behind him. "I won't miss the smell," Mary says. William laughed. Quiet, genuine. "The River Liffey? At low tide? That's God's honest punishment." "I'll miss the light, though," she pauses. "The way it comes through in the afternoon just before it rains." Her eyes drifted to the window. Her hand found William's arm. She held it not too loose and not too tight. In the holding was everything, the life they built there. The child they buried here. The version of themselves that existed on the streets. The boy at the furniture maker's window. The girl in the washhouse stream. The young couple walking in opposite directions from a church. "There's light where we're going, Mary. Different light. Wider." "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it." She rested her head on his shoulder. They sat together in the dark, outside. The gas lamps flickered on. Stephen Street, Aston's Quay, all the places William Boog once stood and dreamed of something more. Pre-dawn, the street was empty. The gas lamps still burned, making wet cobblestones appear as if they were glowing. William loaded the trunk onto a hired cart while Mary gathered the children. They were half asleep, bundled into too many layers for the journey south, their small faces puffy and bewildered on her way out the last time. Mary grabbed the door frame and leaned into it. William took one last look at his shop. He left some of his tools as well as his now empty tin. The sign, W. Boog, bootmaker, still hung above the door of number 13. He did not take it down. He did not reach up and touch the letters the way he did when he first hung it. The way he did at number 7. The way he did on Stephen Street when the paint was still wet and his name existed on something fixed in the physical world for the first time. He just looked at it. Then he turned away. The cart pulled out. The family rode south through streets they will never walk again. The cobblestones of Dublin passed beneath the wheels. Stephen Street, where he was born, where he watched the furniture maker through the glass, where Mary wrung sheets in the washhouse steam. Michael's Lane, where she took his hand for the first time. Aston's Quay, where his name hung above the different doors. All of it sliding past in the shade of the Dublin morning that did not know it was the last. Queenstown, County Cork, 150 miles south of Dublin, and a different Ireland entirely. The harbor opened like a mouth to the Atlantic. The town climbed the hillside in rows of painted houses. Yellows, blues, pinks, cheerful colors that feel almost cruel against the mood of the people below. The quayside was packed with immigrants, hundreds of them, families clutching bundles, old women weeping, young men trying to look brave and failing. A priest moved through the crowd, offering blessings to people who may or may not want them. Children ran between legs, not yet understanding what was happening. And dominating the harbor, the city of Paris. A 3-masted steamship, her hull black and massive against the gray water. She was not beautiful, she was functional, built to carry human cargo across 3,000 miles of Atlantic. Smoke curled from her signal funnel. 863 souls would board the ship. William led his family through the crowd toward the gangway. A clerk sat at a small table, ledger, open pen in hand, recording names as passengers boarded. William encouraged Letitia and Teresa to run up to the front. They were the smallest ones who could walk on their own. Letitia 4, Teresa 3. Letitia gripped her younger sister's hand and stepped up to the clerk with the composure that belonged to a much older girl. She faced the clerk with the same steady gaze that Mary once leveled at William through the washhouse steam. The clerk dipped his pens. "Names?"
"Letitia Boog, and this is Teresa."
The clerk wrote 2 names. The first 2 names on a manifest of 863. Passengers number 1 and passengers number 2 on the city of Paris were a 4-year-old girl and her 3-year-old sister, and neither of them was crying. Excerpt from the District of New York, Port of New York. Letitia and Teresa were the first 2 to board the city of Paris in 1873. Mary followed with Mary Margaret, holding her skirt and Austin's beside her. She was pregnant again, her belly forming in a tiny bump against the fabric of her dress, and she walked forward with her eyes fixed on the ship. William watched them and followed up later, caught in the shuffle, separated by the tide of bodies pressing toward the gangway. The clerk had already moved on. William did not care about ledgers. They passed an old woman sitting on a stone wall, rosary beads wound through her fingers, watching the emigrants board. She had watched this scene 1,000 times. Sons, daughters, grandchildren, all walking up the gangway and vanishing into the hull of the ship and never coming back. She caught Mary's eye and crossed herself. William stopped at the base of the gangway. He set the trunk down for the first time. He was not looking forward. He was looking back. Not at Dublin, which was far behind them now, but at Ireland itself. The green hills above the Queenstown, the spire of the St. Colman's Cathedral, half-built, rose above the town. His brow tightened. George and William Jr. stayed in Ireland. The rest of them went west. The sun was rising behind them, east. They were heading west. He turned to Mary. Ready? Mary adjusted her dress. She looked at the city of Paris, this enormous, smoking, terrifying machine that would carry them away from everything they had ever known. She looked at him. I think I was ready since Michael's Lane. William picked up the trunk. The families walked up the gangway, the children's small feet on the wooden planks, the creak of the ship, the cry of the gulls. A captain called out orders from the deck above. Somewhere below, the engine rumbled to life, a low, steady vibration that climbed through the planks and into their bones. 6 figures ascended a gangway against the morning sky, smallest to largest, silhouetted, moving toward something none of them could see, and all of them were choosing. The ship pulled away. Queenstown receded. The painted houses grew small. The green hills of Cork dissolved into mist. The old woman on the wall watched until there was nothing left to see. The city of Paris pushed through the mouth of the harbor and into the open Atlantic. Behind her, Ireland. Ahead, 3,000 miles of gray water. The morning sun caught the wake, a golden road on the surface pointing west. Part 2. The Dark Crossing and Boston. 1873 to 1878. Chapter 9. The Holding with Blinking Creatures. Darkness, then the sound. It came from everywhere at once, a low, constant groan of timber and iron as the ship moaned against the sea. Water dripped from the ceiling in steady, patient drops that found the back of the neck, the edge of a blanket, the bridge of a sleeping child's nose. Coughing echoed through the hold, whimpering, the muttered cadence of a man praying in Irish Gaelic somewhere in the dark. The smell was the first thing you noticed. Unwashed bodies, bilge water, vomit, and something older that clung to the wood from every crossing before this one. The smell of human cargo, repeated and absorbed into the grain of the ship itself. Steerage was a long, low hold divided by rough wooden bunks stacked 3 high, hundreds of people packed together because that is, functionally, what they were. Families huddled in tight clusters. A child cried somewhere far down the row. A woman retched into a bucket. The bucket was already full. The Boog family occupied a middle bunk. Mary lay on her back with one arm around Teresa, who was small enough to tuck against her ribs. Her other hand rested on her pregnant belly, the slight new bump pressing against the fabric of her dress. Her face was a mask of endurance. The older children pressed together in the bunk like a litter of pups. Austin, 6, and his arms slung across Mary Margaret, 5. Letitia, 4, slept with a smile and a calmness on her face. William sat on the edge of the bunk, awake. His boots were off because there were nowhere to go. He stared into the dark hold, watching the shapes of 800 other human beings who had made the same impossible bet he did. His mouth was a tight line. He did not look afraid. He looked like a man running numbers he already knew the answer to. The ship pitched. Everything slid, and a tin cup rolled across the floor with a high, wandering note. A woman gasped. The timbers screamed into their joints. William steadied his family with one hand against the upper frame, the other braced against the bunk rail. Mary Margaret's eyes found his in the dark. He gave her the smallest nod. She closed her eyes. The crossing unfolded into fragments. There was no narrative to it, no arc, no beginning and middle and end. There were only days which, one indistinguishable from the last, counted not by the sunrise, but by the quality of the light that filtered through the hatch. Dawn? William carried Austin up the narrow steps to the deck. The boy's eyes were wide at the sight of the open ocean. Water in every direction. No land, no end, no edge. Just the gray Atlantic rolling toward a horizon that never arrived. William held his son and said nothing. What would he say? Below, Mary distributed hardtack, porridge, and water to the children. She broke the biscuits into precisely equal pieces with her rough hands. Letitia gave half of hers to Teresa without being asked. Mary saw this and her eyes welled up, but she turned away before anyone noticed. A storm came on the 4th night. The crew sealed the hatch and steerage became a coffin. The ship rolled until the world tilted sideways and the screaming started. Buckets overturned. Children wailed in the chaos. William braced his family in the bunk with his body, arms spread back, pressed against the upper frame, his legs locked against the rail. A human wall between his children in the pitching dark. Mary held the little ones against her chest and closed her eyes. She waited for it to pass, or to kill them. It passed. The calm sea returned. Fresh air and color poured through the open hatch and reached down into the hold like a hand. Austin couldn't resist, and with William's permission, he headed above. Austin sat on a deck with his legs dangling over the edge, watching the wake trail behind the ship in a white road that dissolved into blue. He was 6 years old, and the world he knew disappeared. He did not know that yet. He only knew that water was very blue. Night again. The hold had a rhythm now. The sick coughed. The well slept. The ship groaned underneath all of it. Mary lay awake and took William's hand and pressed it to her belly. He felt the baby kick. In this terrible place, in the stinking dark of the ship's bottom, new life insisted on itself. William lay in the bunk with his eyes open, looking up through the hatch at the stripe of the night sky. Stars. The first clear night in weeks. He had moved to his breast pocket. The paper was there, damp from the crossing, softening at the crease, but there. His lips moved in the dark. It's doubtful he was praying to God, but he was saying something when no one was around. He might have been counting. He might have been reading names to the stars. On the 9th morning, the hatch opened and passengers surged onto the deck, blinking like creatures emerging from underground. And there it was, New York. The number was a forest of masts and smokestacks. New York. The harbor was a forest of masts and smokestacks. Castle Garden loomed on the shore, and beyond it, the city itself, a jagged, impossible skyline that looked nothing like anything these people had ever seen. Brick and stone and iron packed tight along the shore, the building crowding each other for room, immense and indifferent and unlike any place on earth they had been taught to imagine. William stood at the rail with his family. Mary stared at her mouth open. The children crowded against the gunwale, railing on the boat deck, craning to see. Even Austin, who had been quiet for days, was wide-eyed. Around them, other passengers wept. Men performed the sign of the cross. Women fell to their knees. A woman held her baby up toward the shore. The baby squinted against the light. William did not weep. He watched. His eyes moved across the skyline, the docks, the chaos of arrival, sizing it up the way he had once sized up the streets in Dublin. Looking for the angle, the opening, the place where a man could plant his feet.
Mother of God,
Mary whispered. We're not staying here, William said. His voice was steady. This is the door, not the house. Chapter 10. Welcome to America. Next. The cavernous rotunda of the castle garden swallowed them whole. The noise was overwhelming. Multiple languages at once, crying babies, shouting officials, the shuffle of 1,000 feet on stone floors. Immigrants moved through lines that seemed to lead nowhere and everywhere at the same time. The air was thick with humidity and the sour smell of people who had not bathed in weeks. The Boog family waited. The children sat on the trunk. Teresa had fallen asleep against Letitia, her small body curled sideways and perfectly trusting. Austin watched a German family arguing with an official, their hands flying, their voices rising. Mary Margaret held her mother's hand and did not let go. When they reached the front of the line, a processing clerk sat behind a small table with a ledger open and a pen in his hand. He did not look up. Destination? New York or Boston, William said. Work? I was a bootmaker. Now looking for labor work, perhaps a painter. Labor it is. The clerk still had not raised his eyes. Got any money? What do you want with my money? The clerk looked up for the first time. His expression was flat, the face of a man who had asked these same questions since morning and would ask them again until dark. Your pounds are useless here. Hand over your money and we'll convert it to real American money, or step aside and go play with your fantasy money. William hesitated. He reached into his coat slowly and produced the remainder of his savings. He placed it on the table. The clerk counted it, scratched a number in the ledger, and pushed a small pile of American bills and coins back across the surface. After conversion, you get $51.20. Welcome to America. The stamp came down. The clerk was already calling for the next in line before the ink was dry. A clerk processed the Boog family into America in under 2 minutes. Outside the depot, chaos wore a different face. Runners, hustlers, and con men circled the dazed immigrants like gulls around a fishing boat. Signs in 6 languages advertised boarding houses, train tickets, labor agents, hands grabbed at sleeves, voices called out promises in accents from every corner of Europe. William pushed through the crowd, away from the hundreds of Irish who had been on that ship. He found himself surrounded by voices and accents he had never heard. He nodded at anyone who looked his way. Hat tips everywhere. How do you do? Afternoon, sir. He watched the Americans greet each other and joined in. Mary and the children watched him do it. During these moments, with one hand on the trunk, the other reaching back to keep Mary close, a hand grabbed his arm. William turned, fist ready. But the man who held him was Irish. Broad-faced, missing teeth, wearing a well-worn coat. His accent was pure Cork, softened by years in America. Easy, brother. I can hear the Dublin on you from 10 feet away. Just off the boat? What's it to you? William kept his fist half raised. Nothing to me. I come in peace. God and Mary be with you. The Cork man released his arm and stepped back, palms open, showing he meant no harm. William shoots a brief look. Don't give me this God business. You stood out to me. Lovely family you've got. I was you 4 years ago, standing right where you are standing, and the same look on my face. Listen, you tradesman. Bootmaker. I had my own shop on the Liffey. I heard I could make a better living with painting. I'll take a chance on that. Have you gone mad? This place will chew you up, spit you out. The man leaned in and lowered his voice, not of secrecy, but of something closer to kindness. Americans are not too fond of us Irish. They dream of us dead for us. I'm afraid I'm going back to our homeland. You should consider the same. William looked at Mary. She stood behind him holding the baby, surrounded by children standing in the middle of a country she had never seen. She gave him the smallest nod. Wherever you go, I go. We're going to Boston. How do I get there? Grand Central Station. That's where you need to go. Get on the train to Boston. It'll take you 6-7 hours. $5.20 per passenger. They may cut a deal for your little ones. William reached into his coat and counted the American bills. The arithmetic was quick and grim. I can afford it. You're a brave man. The corkman clapped his shoulder. Prince Street, the North End. Ask for any Irishman. They'll sort you. May the Lord keep you and hollow off his hand. He disappeared into the crowd. William watched him go, then turned to his family. Boston. Chapter 11. Slums again, but with an American accent. Boston, Massachusetts, 1873. Prince Street sat 4 blocks west of the harbor in Boston's North End, close enough that the salt air reached the tenement's windows on mornings when the wind came off the water. The street was narrow, brick-walled on both sides, and dense with Irish families who had arrived in waves since the famine years ago. By 1873, the neighborhood had its own parishes and its own mutual aid societies, its own ward bosses who could deliver votes and favors in the same handshake. The Irish had built themselves a village inside a city. They had also built themselves a cage. William walked Prince Street for the first time, carrying nothing but the trunk and whatever remained of the money from Queenstown. Mary walked beside him, looking skeptical. The older children trailed behind. Austin had Teresa by the hand. Mary Margaret walked alone. Letitia stayed close to her mother. The cold hit first. Dublin had a rain and damp, a gray chill that settled into the lining of a coat. Boston's cold was something else. It came off the harbor and struck the face with blunt authority. The children had never felt wind with their actual teeth. Letitia pulled her collar up and kept walking. Teresa grabbed at the air as if she could catch it between her fingers. South of here, the Great Fire had burned through whole blocks the previous November, and now the noise of reconstruction carried into the residential streets all day. Prince Street itself had not burned. What lived here was older damage. The tenements 3 and 4 stories high, barely 8 feet of sky between them. Wooden staircases bolted to the backs of buildings. Clotheslines strung between windows so thick with sheets and undershirts the sun lost its way before reaching the street. An Italian grocer had set up the corner of Prince and Salem. His hand-painted sign in a language none of the Irish could read. The smell of garlic drifted into the evening cabbage air. The neighborhood was changing. Not yet. Soon. Mary saw it all. Her face fell just slightly. She recovered fast, but she always did. But William caught it. It's temporary, he said, low just for her. That's good. Temporary is all you know anyways, she said without looking at him. That landed. William did not respond. They kept walking. On their first Sunday in Boston, they walked to St. Stephen's on Hanover Street. The church sat between 2 tenement buildings. Its brick facade rose above the rooftops, with a quiet authority that surrounding architecture lacked. A bell rang from the steeple, and the sound carried down Prince Street and into the alleys where the Irish were pulling on their best clothes and herding children toward the door. Mary had pressed the children's shirts with the flat iron borrowed from the woman next door. She had combed their hair with the water and a wooden comb missing 3 teeth. She had scrubbed their faces until they shone. William wore his one good coat and a collar that Mary had starched stiff enough to hold a shape. He looked uncomfortable in it. He pulled at it twice on the walk over. The church was full. Standing room along the back wall. The pews held Irish families packed tight, men with thick hands folded in their laps, women in shawls that crossed the Atlantic. Children wedged between adults and told to be still. The priest was Irish himself, County Mayo by the sound of his vowels. And he spoke in English with occasional phrases of Latin that the older women mouthed along with him. Mary knelt and performed the sign of the cross. She closed her eyes and her lips moved. The children followed, all except William. He sat when others knelt. He was last to stand when others stood. He went through the sequence a half beat behind everyone else. He was here for Mary. She knew it. He knew she knew it. The arrangement had been in place since Dublin. After Mass, the family spilled onto the footpath. The Irish network operated here the same as it had in Dublin. You arrive, you were absorbed, you were given directions to the nearest grocer in the name of a man who might have work. An older woman from Gateway gripped Mary's hand and asked where they were from and how many children and where they were living. Two men in paint-spattered coats shook William's hand and asked what trade. A boy Austin's age appeared and two of them sized each other up and said nothing and ran off together toward the end of the block. William watched the crowd thin. He noticed the men. The ones with trades moved differently from the ones without. A man with the skill had a certain set to his shoulders. A man looking for day labor kept his eyes lower. William had been reading bodies since Dublin. Mary noticed the women, the ones who held their children close, the ones who held their children loosely, the ones whose children were already gone. She could read the losses in a woman's face, the depth of the lines, the particular emptiness in the eyes. She saw two women standing apart from the group with expressions she recognized. She did not approach them. She simply saw them. She filed it away. They walked home through a narrow street. Children filled the gutters and chased each other between the carts. One boy stood on an overturned crate and pretended to be a preacher. His congregation was a stray dog and two smaller boys who pelted him with chestnuts. The dog took a chestnut in the mouth and trotted away, looking satisfied. Letitia watched the boy on the crate. She tugged at Mary's hand and pointed. Mary looked. She did not smile, but something behind her eyes softened for a half second. The children of Boston survived the same as the children of Dublin. Noise and motion and the refusal to acknowledge that anything was wrong. 2 rooms this time. A luxury by their standards. The building was brick, which felt sturdy after Dublin's crumbling plaster. The hallway stank of cabbage and chamber pots, and the walls were thin enough to hear every argument, every prayer, every sneeze, every cough. Mary set up the space with practiced efficiency. She had done this before. Michael's Lane, Aston's Quay, the ship, now this. Each time she built a home out of nothing. Blankets arranged just so. The children's sleeping spots designated. A corner for cooking. Her hands did not pause. There was no surveying the room, no standing in the doorway deciding where things should go. She already knew. William stood at the window. Outside Prince Street pulsed with the life. He watched a house painter cross the street up on a ladder, rolling whitewash onto a building facade. William studied the man's technique, how he loaded the brush, the economy of his strokes. His bootmaker hands flexed at his sides. Learning. Always learning. Mary left the children sleeping before dawn. She had been awake for an hour already, listening to the building breath, listening to the rats negotiate the walls, listening to the window panes shudder from the wind, thinking of the similarities. She took the basket and went out alone. Prince Street was mostly empty at this hour. A lamplighter was finishing his rounds on the opposite side. His pole tapped each lamp and the gas flames went dark one by one. The sky was still black, but the horizon held a thin line of gray above the rooftops. She walked toward the public pump on the corner of Salem Street. 2 other women were already there. They nodded at Mary. She nodded back. The pump handle was stiff from the cold. Mary worked it with both hands until the water came. It was cloudy. She looked at it, filled her jug anyway. She continued up the block towards the small market that opened early for the women who came before their husbands woke. The vendor was an old Irishman from Cork who sold potatoes and turnips and whatever else he could source from the farms outside the city. His prices were fair. His produce was not always fresh. He did not pretend otherwise. "Morning, missus." "Morning. Have you oats today?" "I do. They came in yesterday from a farm in Concord. Still good." Mary picked through the oats with her fingers. She pressed a few between her thumb and forefinger. Dry. Clean. No mold. She bought a measure. She bought 2 potatoes and an onion. She counted her coins in her palm before paying. William had left her a small amount for the week. She could stretch it. She had been stretching money since before she could read. On the walk back, she passed St. Stephen's. The doors were open through Mass had not begun. A candle burned on the vestibule. Mary stopped. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. The church was empty. The altar was plain. The air smelled of incense and cold stone. She did not go inside. She stood at the threshold, with her basket on her arm, and looked at the crucifix above the altar from 20 feet away. She had not prayed in a while, not properly. She had gone through the motions at Mass. She had folded her hands and bowed her head because that was what a Catholic's mother did. The words had stopped reaching whatever they were meant to reach. The line between her and God had gone slack. She could feel it hanging there. She did not know how to tighten it, and she was not certain she wanted to. I am still there. I am still here, she said to the empty church, a prayer, a statement of fact. She said it aloud because she needed to hear her own voice in space larger than the 2 rooms on Prince Street. The change was a lot for her, and she did not know if she was pleading or taunting. She paused and only heard her echo back. The guilt reaches her instantly. She performs the sign of the cross, puts her hands together, and genuflects. She slowly stands and a peace settles over her. She smiles. She turned and walked home. The street was filled with early morning workers. A man pushed a cart loaded with ice blocks toward the fish market. 2 boys carried buckets of coal between them. A woman swept her front step with a broom that was missing half its bristles. Mary walked through all of it, straight and forward, with her shoulders square. She was not lost. She knew exactly where she was. She was in Boston. Her children were upstairs in a tenement that smelled of cabbage. Her husband was sleeping on a floor he would leave before the sun was fully up. Her dead sons were in the ground in a city across the ocean. She climbed the stairs. The building was waking up around her. She set the basket down and began to cook. The oats went into the pot. Water from the jug, a pinch of salt. She stirred. Letitia was the first awake. She came to the kitchen corner without being called. She did not speak. She picked up the small broom that Mary had kept behind the door and began sweeping the area around the stove. The broom was too tall for her. She gripped it halfway up the handle and worked it with the short, deliberate strokes. The strokes that didn't lead anywhere. It was just cute. Letitia was just imitating what she had seen before.
You're up early, Ma.
I was.
I peeked out the window. You walked toward the church. Did you go to church?
Mary paused her stirring. Yes, dear. I didn't stay. I stood at the door. Letitia swept in silence for a moment. Then she said something that Mary would carry for years.
Seems like a good door to stand in.
Mary looked at her daughter, 5 years old, standing in a Boston tenement with a broom she could barely manage, saying profound things. The blurb and splat sounds emitted behind her. She turned back to the pot. The oats were thickening. She stirred them and did not speak. Letitia went back to sweeping. The broom scraped the floorboards in a short, even passes. She made a few small piles of dust and debris before she moved on. From the other room came the sound of younger children shifting in their blankets, the small negotiations of bodies waking in a cramped space. William came through pulling on his shirt. He looked at Mary. He looked at the pot. He looked at Letitia sweeping with a broom that reached past her head. It smells good, he said. Sit down, Mary said. It will be ready soon. He sat. Mary ladled oats into a bowl and set in front of him. She did not sit down herself. She stood with her back to the stove and watched the window where the first gray light was beginning to separate the rooftops from the sky. The church bell at St. Stephen's rang once, a single low note that hung in the cold air and faded. Mary's hand rested on the edge of the pot. She was listening to something. Not the bell, not the children, not the street. The space after the bell had rang. A Saturday, weeks later, the children were with Austin in the room. Mary told William she was going to the market. She did go to the market. She bought oats and a turnip and a small piece of salt pork wrapped in paper that was already going translucent with grease. Then she kept walking. She walked south through the narrow streets, past the tenements, past the storefronts, with their hand-lettered signs, past two women arguing over a clothesline strung between their windows. She walked until the building thinned and the harbor opened up in front of her. She had not been out to the water since they had arrived. The harbor was loud with commerce, ships at the wharves, men hauling rope, carts loaded with barrels and crates. The smell was fish and salt accompanied by the stink of low tide. Nothing like the Liffey, bigger, rougher. The wind came off the open water and carried a cold she could feel in her bones. She walked to the end of the wharf. The planks were slick with brine and she set her feet carefully. She stood at the edge with her basket on her arm and looked east across the harbor, past the islands, toward the open Atlantic. The ocean she had spent 9 days crossing was out there. Ireland was on the other side of it. George and William Jr. were on the other side of it. Her family were on the other side of it. Every door she had ever walked through before this year was on the other side of it. And she was standing here in Boston with salt pork in a basket and no one beside her. She stood there long enough for the cold to soak through her shawl. A fisherman mending a net on the next wharf looked up at her and looked away. She was another Irish woman at the waterfront. There were hundreds of them. On the walk back, she passed a cart selling apples. A farm cart. The man up from the country with a load of Baldwins. Small and red and hard. Mary stopped. She looked at the apples. She counted the coins in her palm. She bought one. Not for the children. Not to cook with. She bought it and ate it, standing on the corner of Prince and Salem. The juice running cold over her fingers, the apple so tart her eyes watered. She ate it down to the core and threw the core into the gutter and wiped her hand down her skirt. She picked up her basket and walked home. Her fingers smelled of apple all the way up the stairs. All right. Chapter 12. Don't Tempt Fate. The first week William walked to the harbor alone. Prince Street led east to the wharves in the 10 minutes. He followed it until the buildings thinned and the smell changed. Fish guts and brine and the black tang of coal smoke off the steamers. The harbor opened before him, gray and wide and busy. Long Wharf was loud with commerce. Men hauled cargo off ships in tenant teams, shoulder to shoulder, the work governed by a foreman named Kennedy who stood on a crate and called names from a manifest. If you moved too slow, the next man took your place. William stepped closer. He picked up a crate from a stack near the gangway and carried it to the line. Nobody stopped him. He set it where the others were settling theirs and went back for another. The crate was heavier than it looked. Saltfish packed tight. The brine had soaked through the wood and the rough planks bit into his fingers. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and tasted it. Sharp and mineral. Nothing like the sea air off the Liffey. He carried 3 before Kennedy looked at him. "Who are you?" "Nobody. Just got here." Kennedy looked at his hands. Bootmaker's hands, not dock hands. "I ain't paying you today. Come back Monday. If you're lucky, I'll see what I've got." William walked home with his palms stinging and the smell of fish salt still on his skin. He flexed his fingers. The work was blunt. Lift, carry, set down, go back. No skill to separate one man from another. Just a body, and willingness to ruin it. He thought of Mary scrubbing his hands each night in Dublin. How she could read his whole day in the cuts and calluses. If he worked the docks, his hands would tell her nothing. They would be sore. A steamer was tied at the far end of the wharf. Passengers were boarding, going east, back to wherever they had decided America was not for them. A woman carried an infant up the gangway without turning around. William watched her until she disappeared into the ship. He did not envy her. He envied her certainty. He kept walking. The cork man had said this would be tough. For the first time, William tried something physical, and he wasn't certain about it. He wanted to quit. He also felt the sting of the trade that really didn't want him back. The neighborhood ran on paint. Every crew had passed since Prince Street, had brushes and ladders and work. he would finally find one by morning. He entered the painting trade the same week. He approached a crew working a brownstone on the next block. The foreman was in his 50s, Irish, slender build, and skeptical eye. He looked William up and down. William did not flinch. The foreman shoved a brush into his hand and pointed at a wall. William painted, badly at first, drips uneven coverage, brush strokes visible in the dried surface. The foreman shook his head. William stayed late, scraped all the wall clean, and repainted the section. Better. Not good. Better. His hands learned a new language. The same hands that had stitched leather, that had held a dying child, that had counted coins by candlelight in a room above Aston's Quay. He watched an older painter mix pigments, lead white ground in linseed oil, thinned with turpentine, until it ran smooth off the brush. Turpentine was what made the paint work. Too much and the coat went thin, chalk within a month. Too little and the brush dragged and the surface dried rough. The old man shoved him the ratios. William memorized them the way he had once memorized stitching patterns. Not by writing them down, but by doing them until his hands remembered. He came home at night and painted in his hair, under his nails, ground into the lines of his palms. Mary scrubbed his hands over a basin. The water turned white, then gray, then clear. It became their nightly ritual, his hands and hers over a tin basin. The day's work dissolved in the water between them. She studied his hands while she cleaned them. They had changed since Dublin. The bootmaker's calluses were fading. New ones were formed along the palm where the brush handle pressed. The knife scars from leather work were still visible, but they were being covered over by paint stains that never fully washed out. His hands were becoming a different instrument. She cleaned them as she always had cleaned them, with care, with attention to details that told her where he had been and what he had done. One evening she found a cut on his thumb. He had not mentioned it. She pressed the cloth against it, and he flinched. When did this happen? The scaffold joint. A nail was poking out. I caught it reaching for the brush. You should wrap it. It will heal on its own. I said you should wrap it. She tore a strip from an old shirt and wound it around his thumb, tight but not too tight. She tied it off with a knot, so small it nearly disappeared into the fabric. William looked at the bandage. Then he looked at Mary. She was already drying her hands. The conversation was over. The thumb was wrapped. He went to bed with the bandage still on. In the morning it was gone. Mary had removed it while he slept and replaced it with a cleaner strip. He did not ask how she had managed this without waking him. He knew better than to question the domestic operations of Mary Boog. Weeks passed. His strokes grew confident. Clean lines, no drips. The foreman watched from below and nodded. William received his first full week's pay. He stood in the hallway of the tenement and counted the bills. More than bootmaking, more than Dublin. He allowed himself a moment. Then he folded the money, put it in his coat, and went inside to his family. The painting crews gathered each morning on the corner of Prince and Commercial. Foremen came by in carts and called out the day's job site. Men who had been hired stepped forward. Men who had not stood against the wall and waited. The wall had a certain population. It grew on rainy days when exterior work stopped. It shrank in summer when every hand was needed. William stood at the wall for 3 mornings before the foreman took him on full time. He watched the other men, their techniques, their shortcuts. One painter mixed his white lead too thin. The coverage looked acceptable, wet, but chalked within a month. Another applied primer over damp wood. The paint bubbled by August. William filed these observations away. He learned as much as from poor work as from good work. The economy was turning. The panic had hit in September. Banks collapsed, shipping slowed, dock jobs thinned out. Men who had unloaded cargo in August were standing against the same wall as the painters by October, and there were fewer walls to stand against. William watched the dock workers drift into the neighborhood looking for anything. He kept his head down and kept painting. A man who could finish a job clean and no time was harder to replace than a man who could lift a barrel. He painted a row of townhouses on Beacon Hill that autumn. The neighborhood sat before the harbor on a steep incline. Walking from Prince Street to the job site took him through a different Boston. The streets widened, the buildings straightened, brick facades gave way to brownstone. Iron railings replaced wooden fences. The people on Beacon Hill moved at a different speed. They carried parcels instead of bundles. Their shoes had been resold by someone who cared about the work. William noticed the shoes. He always noticed the shoes. He could tell a Northampton factory boot from a hand-lasted Irish pair at 20 paces. On Beacon Hill, the shoes were American-made, good leather, proper heels. He missed the trade. His hands missed the all and the last. Paint was what Boston offered, and paint was what he would master. From the top of his ladder on Beacon Hill, he could see the harbor, the forest of masts, the steamships trailing smoke. The water was gray most days. Occasionally the sun broke through and the harbor turned a color that reminded him of the Liffey at golden hour. Not the same. Close enough to sting. A rare evening of warmth, the family was together in the room. 2 rooms on Prince Street, and for once, the walls were dry and did not feel like they were closing in. Mary had a proper meal, nothing extravagant, just pea soup and sausages, but real food cooked on a real stove. The smell of it filled the rooms and pushed back the cabbage and damp that lived in the hallway. The children ate at a small table. Austin enjoyed how Mary added salt to the sausage. Its savory, salty juices squirted out onto some bites. Otherwise, the pea soup was a standard for the Boogs. Austin chimed in.
This morning I saw a dog chasing a cart down the street and never stopped barking. Woof, woof!
He dropped his hands and knees and imitating the dog, fast and barking. He barked all the way across the room. Mary Margaret, who was becoming quiet and serious like her father, smiled. The girls laughed at Austin. Austin made his way back to the table. Laughter and play was not a currency the Boogs were rich in. The air in the room shifted with it. William sat back and watched his family. He had more opportunities here. The children were fed, laughing, and alive. Mary caught his eye across the table. She raised an eyebrow. Don't tempt fate. He raised his cup slightly. I know. Outside, the harbor wind found Prince Street and pressed against the window glass. Somewhere below, a door banged, and a woman's voice called a name William did not recognize. The voice called again, sharper, then nothing. Mary's eyes moved to the window. She held them there a beat too long before turning back to clear the plates. Okay, this has been the reading of Chasing the Sun, written by Ryan J Boog, narrated by James A Greig. Thank you.